Unemployment is low in Canada, and there are hundreds of thousands of unfilled positions. But what kind of jobs are they? Well, here's a look by the numbers. As of the end of September last year, there were more than 950,000 jobs that were unfilled in this country. Almost half of them, or 372,000, were in Ontario alone. So what kind of jobs are there? Well, 35% of them are in sales and service. Another 16% were trades, transport, or equipment operators. The majority of the jobs available don't require much education. 35% have no minimum at all. Another 25% require high school only, and 23% more are looking for a diploma or certificate of some kind. In other words, for 83% of the available jobs, no university degree is required. That's reflected in pay, unfortunately. Those with no educational minimum pay $18.85 an hour on average, while those looking for at least high school pay $19.75. That means 60% of the available jobs have an annual income below $40,000 a year. As for where the vacancies are, restaurants and bars report 10.2% vacancy rates, nursing homes 8.5%, trucking 8%, and construction more than 7%. So with the majority of jobs lower paying, is the labor market really all that tight when it comes to higher paying work? Brendan Bernard is senior economist at job search firm Indeed.com. Brendan, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me. So
it jumped out at me that we talk about this tight labor market that might make a lot of workers feel like they could leave their job and find something else easily. It sounds to me, when you look at the data, it really depends on what kind of work you do and what you want.
So I think it depends. That's part of the story, but there has been a shift across sectors and regions in terms of a jump in job openings compared to how things looked a few years ago. So while it currently if we just survey the landscape of job openings today, just an existing snapshot, it does look like the bulk of opportunities are in lower paying areas. That's not exactly a new phenomenon, though. And one reason is just that these are areas of the economy with a lot higher turnover. So one of the reasons that job vacancy rates tend to be elevated in lower paying positions is that people are more likely to be leaving those positions, either for other types of work or to go back to school or different employers. And so job vacancy rates in lower paying areas of the economy are often just structurally higher than other areas of the economy where companies might not always be looking to fill roles. They might not always have roles to backfill. Yeah. But when we compare how things look today compared to where things were, let's say, in 2019, the rise in job vacancies has been quite broad-based across the economy.
So then let's talk then about, it is true that those parts of the economy, that those lower paid jobs have more churn, and that's actually a healthy thing. It creates flexibility on both sides of the equation. There, though, and at the higher end, when you see this number of vacancies, are you seeing what the market would suggest you should see, which is higher wages? Are we seeing wages responding to this so-called tightness in the labor market?
It took a while, well into Canada's pandemic labor market rebound. But in the second half of last year, especially, we started to see some stronger wage growth. Throughout the summer and fall, the labor force survey reported wages growing north of 5% year over year for several consecutive months. So a pretty solid pace of pay gains. Pace of pay gains I was expecting to see start picking up a bit earlier than that. Finally started to translate, though, into stronger pay. And so we have seen the tighter labor market show up in paychecks to a degree, but not matching the pace of inflation that we saw, where even by the end of the year, after a slight cool down, inflation was running north of 6% year over year. Yeah. So still paychecks not quite matching the growth in the cost of living. Hopefully in 2023, we start to see a bit of a reversal of that.
Brendan, great to have you with us. Appreciate your time today.
Thanks for having me.
Brendan Bernard is senior economist at Indeed.com. Well, employers who can't fill positions often ask existing employees to just do more. Of course, the pay stays the same, and we know it's not exactly keeping up with inflation. So is that increasing the frustration among workers, some of whom might wonder if the grass is greener on the other side of the fence? Jennifer Moss is a workplace strategist and author of The Burnout Epidemic. Jennifer, great to have you with us.
It's great to be here.
So let's start with, we have this tight labor market, although, as we've just seen, maybe that the job you want isn't necessarily available out there. Are people still trying to change jobs? Do you think there's more churn than normal right now?
There is actually. It's surprising when you look at, you look at the jobs reports, you see some sectors obviously laying people off, but there's some recent data that shows that there's still a large swath of employers hiring, and there is a lot of attrition. The last data showed that there's still 41% of the global workforce that plans to resign in the next 3 months. That hasn't changed since 21 and 22. So we are definitely seeing that there's jobs out there and people still are quitting.
And so you would expect a rational employer to respond to that by treating their existing employees better. You would hope anyway, but certainly that's the rational thing to do if you want to hang on to them. Are we seeing much of that? It doesn't feel like it. It feels a little bit like the more familiar story is if you can't fill the jobs, you ask the existing workforce to do more for the same pay.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because, I had this conversation with someone the other day where it's like, well, we have all this more employee experience data than we've ever had before. There's people that are making decisions like quitting, so we can't ignore that. People are quietly quitting. They're rage applying, where they're looking to, get as many resumes out there as possible. And you would think that we would listen to that. But instead, employers are just, kind of looking at it like, well, maybe there's a reshuffle. People can come in and come out, not recognizing how expensive that is for them. It's this kind of jam the toothpaste back in the tube strategy instead of saying, okay, maybe we should be a bit transformational because this is a different workforce that have different experiences now that they've gone through this pandemic.
Interesting. So maybe not totally rational on the part of the employer. For those employees that are, as you say, rage applying, this new term that we're seeing kicked around, does it work? I mean, is there enough out there that people can actually, because as we know, when you change jobs, that's when you're most likely to get a serious pay increase. Is now the time to apply whether you're enraged or not?
The thing is that rage applying isn't really, it's more like a numbers game. So it's kind of like if I spray my resume out to 1,000 people without any cover letter or any kind of reasoning for being in that job, then maybe I might get 1 or 2 opportunities. So, it does work, I guess, if in some cases, and I've seen that people are describing anecdotally that it's worked for them, but really we should be, be more considerate and intentional. Do you really want to go into another job that's just as much of a burnout environment than you're in right now? We need to be asking the right questions, making sure we're probing, and researching the person that's going to be hiring us, the company, to make sure that we are going to have a better experience of work. And so there's the benefit, yes, of the numbers game, but it's not really getting people out of their current situation. It's just pushing the can further down the road.
Just a few seconds here, but based on what you're seeing out there, we have seen wage increases moderating slightly. Does this feel like a labor market where we should expect to see wages stay pretty strong?
Yeah, there are still a need for talent, and there's not enough talent out there. We're seeing more people retire and staying retired. There's no returnment. There's a lot of women that have left the workforce, and they've switched out into different types of jobs. We have needs in different sectors. So I think, yes, we're going to see that increase, and we're going to still see increases in benefits and other, mental health supports in the future.
Jennifer, so good to have you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Jennifer Moss is a workplace strategist and author of the book, The Burnout Epidemic. Coming up, what can consumers do to recover damages from a giant products company? That's still ahead. But first, Netflix is beginning its promised crackdown on password sharing. Canadians can expect an email outlining how and where they can use their accounts with new fees for use for multiple locations. That will include a higher fee for those who use their accounts at a second location like a cottage, something that may not sit well with Canadians. Turns out Netflix isn't so chill. We're back after this.